Presence, the podcast for everyone interested in bodywork, embodiment, and somatic practices. I'm Andrew Rosenstock, your host and guide on this enlightening journey. With my expertise as a somatic movement therapist, yoga therapist, and certified Rolfer, I'll merge clinical insight with real-world experience to enrich our discussions with our guests. Through engaging and informative talks, this podcast delves into mind-body paradigms, offering insights and strategies to empower personal growth. Your support is vital for our grassroots and lo-fi production. If you connect with our content, please leave a positive review and subscribe on your preferred platform. Your engagement helps us reach a broader audience and supports our mission. So thanks for tuning in today to Touching into Presence. Fasten your seatbelt as we embark on a journey to explore the transformative power of contemplative and somatic practices together. It was a pleasure to be in conversation today with Duffy Allen. Duffy has been practicing Rolfing and structural integration and Rolf movement since 1995. She was a faculty member at DIRI for 15 years. She particularly enjoys teaching from a place of curiosity and affirmation. Prior to embarking in the field of structural integration, she was a scientist. Currently, she lives, practices, and teaches in Steamboat Springs, Colorado, and her favorite word is ineffable. In today's talk, we had a comprehensive discussion about our personal and professional experiences, including teaching methods, the importance of relationship and connection in the practice of healing, and the evolution of our approach to client care. We also shared about the importance of integration in this work and emphasizing the need for a balance between reductionist and holistic approaches. We really get into a lot more. I really appreciate all the talks I've had with Duffy outside of this podcast, and I'm really grateful that I get to share her with more today, especially because she has a class coming up in June of 2024 in Seattle. There's not many spaces left, but there are a few, and I would highly recommend anybody looking to learn more to get out there and study with her. And she'll talk about that here too. Anyways, enough of that. Let's head into our talk.
Ta-da!
Hey, Duffy.
How are you?
I like the pictures behind you.
Oh, thanks. Hilma Off Clint. Do you know her work?
No.
She was the first abstract artist. All these men get credit, but she was the first. She's pretty freaking amazing.
Do you have a background in art?
No, far from it. So far from it. But I like art.
Oh, cool. This is my art in my office. It's not very artistic.
Right. Well, somebody did make that up, right?
Someone did make that. Yes, someone has made that up.
That's a large scale situation, almost life size.
Well, this is my hand. My hand on the glue. I don't know if you can see that. It's good.
If you're me, I know that we haven't met.
Yeah,
That's almost life size.
How tall are you?
5 foot nothing.
Oh yeah, same as my wife. You have such a large personality. So
Do I?
yeah, in a good way, not in a bad way. You take up space.
I do. It's true.
Yeah.
Not a lot in the subway, but everywhere else.
But in the world, you take up space in a non-overbearing way. It's lovely. I take it up in an overbearing way. I'm working on it.
Are you originally an East Coaster?
Yes, and when I moved to San Francisco, I grew up in Boston area. But when I moved to San Francisco, I said, "Oh, this makes sense." I've been told for years I don't belong on the East Coast. Although I do. I'm a blend of all worlds, but I'm originally from Boston, and I've been working very hard to lose a lot of my New England ways.
Which ones of the New England ways?
Arrogance, that's for sure. The maybe a little more cold or stoic. Guilt and shame. I got the New England Jewish stuff, so there's that too. Yeah, and being more accepting of other ways. Just getting that that puritanical sense, which I've said before, like I didn't understand New England as well as I do until I spent time working in Ireland. And then I was just like, oh, this makes sense. You have a British church that's controlling things for a long time and leaving their imprint. Oh, this makes a lot of sense. And all of that. Yeah. So
right. Yeah. Yeah. If you really want to unprogram yourself, go to Brazil, because
oh yeah, that help you?
Like the puritanical thing was turned on its head down there. It's like, we need more people. Therefore, it's totally socially acceptable for you to create more people.
Yeah, I think what helped me was being a nomad and traveling all over the world and seeing, oh, in this country, this is the norm. And in this country, this is the norm. In this society, and just really getting to see other ways of living in the world. And then marrying someone from another culture has helped in some ways and made life so much more challenging in other ways.
Right. Where's she from?
She's from mainland China.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Different world.
Oh, yeah. You almost could not be more different. There really are. And I keep trying to get us to meet in the middle because that's where it's at.
Yes, but who's middle?
It's a good point. And what is middle?
Right.
What is middle? My wife actually inspired me in some way. Early on, she had said, you know, if meeting each other doesn't always mean 50-50. It might mean 70-30.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was looking at a quote earlier from Lonnie Jarrett, who's written a bunch of textbooks about 5-element acupuncture. And so 5-element acupuncture, as far as I can understand it, which again, as I said, my knowledge base is 20 miles wide and 1/8 of an inch deep. As far as I can understand it, it's depth psychology with needles. So somaticized depth psychology. And he says that the trait of a good teacher is someone who walks 1/4 mile toward the student walks 3.5 miles toward the teacher, and when they part, everyone is the same. So there's not that like, you know, we have to be so inside each other, and that the student is never released.
Yeah, it's at some point I remember trying to, because my wife teaches, she's a teacher of sorts. I'm trying to sort of share with her the difference between, at least in my lexicon, an instructor, a teacher, and an educator. Because she would say, you know, I'm teaching, and I say, yeah, but you could educate. And she's like, I'm educating them. And I was trying to get this sense of what, and for me, at least, the difference between those. And what you said there, to me, sounds like the educator. It's really shifting the power differentials of, I'm teaching to you, I'm, you know, and more, we are sharing together. And actually, my client just left. I've been working with them for a bit. They're great. And I mean, part of our session today was about how I'm learning so much by being with them. And we ended the session by saying, we did great today, as opposed to you, because it really was us informing each other. It was really wonderful. How apropos to be in talk with you with that, unplanned.
Right. All the spontaneity. I was like, can I really pull this off? I haven't really, this class that I'm going to do is still sort of like huge. You know, I haven't refined it down to like,
well, that's
linear concept, but this is great. I was like, yeah, of course I should do this, because then that will help me sort of organize myself.
Yeah. Well, good. I'm so glad that I get to accidentally help you, because you've accidentally helped, well, actually purposely and accidentally helped me numerous times. And I love, one of the gifts for me of this this podcast, which takes a lot of work, is like I just had recently Pierre Paula on, and having a few people be like, that was great. I'm going to go study with them. I'm going to go read a little more about them, or buy a book from this person, is so awesome to be like, wow, these are people who have inspired me or affected me in some way, and I get to share them out. And even though we haven't met in person yet, capital Y, I so appreciate you. I talk about you fondly with Zorab a lot, and Zoe and I have a great relationship. And I mean that he speaks so much wonders. And I know him before your class, and I know him after your class, and there were just radical shifts in him. And I want more of that, especially in our community, which I see as splintered in so many ways. And I see in my non-splintered way, of course, I see I see so many ways to help with that, with what you are offering. And so I'm hoping that that's my part, is how to get that there so that people can get it.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what you're doing, because I feel like when, it's easy to sit in our little corners and everybody be right about their perspective. But when we get together, there's so much commonality. There's so much like, yeah, like I that bit of the work, I remember that. It's not foremost in my work, but now you're refreshing my memory, and wow, that's great. Or just a different, I think Jim Oshman said Rolfers have to be masters of all trades. We have to know a little bit about everything to do the work. And I think that's really true. And it's just, what part do I bring? What part's at the front of what I bring, in my 20-mile, eighth of an inch deep knowledge, like what's leading today? And that changes all the time. And I think that's what I get from talking with other practitioners, and what keeps me interested is like, oh, there's this thing I forgot about, or that's there that I wasn't aware of. I was no longer conscious of, that I actually do. And I think when I started teaching, that was one of my truest ambitions, was to be able to, I want to teach what I'm actually doing. And that has been unbelievably difficult, because there's so much that we're doing that's totally unconscious. And so it's only when you have the truly open beginning student to be like, what'd you just do? That, you realize, well, I don't know. Let me think about that and feel that and ponder that and meditate on that and wonder about that. And I'll get back to you, which is frustrating to the beginning student, and, tough for the teacher to be like, ooh, I don't have an answer to that question. I'd really like to. So I think that's what keeps me interested in coming into classes, is there's always the like, yeah, I got all this stuff that I'm thinking about, but it's also all the things that you all are thinking about that comes to class and we work with.
Yeah. I mean, I think the contemplative, I mean, really what I hear you saying there is essentially what you just said before about I'm still trying to feel it, so I'm trying to put it into words, and it's so rich, but it's this real sense of meeting people in these ways, and not having it be I am on this upper dais preaching down, but we're on the same place, and I'm figuring it out as well, and I'm I'm in that process as well, and really, for me, maybe not when I was doing the trainings myself, but now I look and say that's, to me, almost the only way we can really learn what I believe Ida was pointing us towards, because it's in that space, it's in that presence, and there's a real dissolution of ego going on there, or maybe not dissolution, but a folding away, which is allowing the in this case Duffy, but the instructor, to be seen and to be vulnerable and to be here. And that is, I mean, I really find, like you were saying, what Ashwin was saying, we're working on human beings. We're not working on fascia alone. There is no fascia without a central nervous system governing it. And so we're working with all of that. I mean, we're not, unless you're licensed as a psychotherapist, we're not doing that. And you can bring that in, but you're working with this human being and this human experience. And how do you support or in whatever way it is for that? So kind of rambled on a bit, but I think it makes some sense.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking a lot about, like, what is it that we're doing? And, we talk about, I mean, Dr. Rolf was very clear. She wasn't about addressing people's symptoms per se. She didn't want to be involved in the fix-it paradigm. She was really after, and she talked about evolving humans. And I think that maybe, some of that might have been her period in time, but I think there is a way that we are asking for people, and what inspires, what I see often when I was a student, and what I see in students who really catch fire with this, is they have had a transformational experience with the work somehow. At some level, they moved up in a stage of who they were. And I'm not saying that it's like a hierarchy and we're going to the top and, somebody's evolved. Somebody's not. We're just, we have had some part of us that was unconscious, brought to light for us. And through the process, I think that's what the 10 series gives us, is it's a methodical way to bring things up to the surface so that we can name it and we can become conscious of it and we can start to work with it and start going from this place of ignorance about what's happening to a place of like, ooh, now I'm aware. I have a symptom that I'm aware of, to, oh, I'm in charge of that symptom. I can start to identify triggers for that symptom, to, I'm going to take responsibility for those triggers, to like, oh, I'm a person who's responsible and I can see in real time, I just projected my stuff onto you and I'm going to own that. And that to me is like, what are we really about? And most of our work kind of happens more at the lower stages of that, like the thing of like, wow, I didn't even know I had feet.
Yeah. That's what the ground feels like. Wow.
Right. Right. It took me 20 years before that happened. And then the thing where people are always, it's the symptom, and getting them to engage with like, hey, you're not a victim here. You're the change agent. You're in charge of this. And I'm here to sort of midwife you into that process. And so that's what I mean when I talk about transformation or transcendence. It's that, we're really moving people along in their capacity to be with what heretofore was unconscious for them. And, like, as I was saying, I have this real interest in kind of this Eastern view of the body, which is about, they talk about stagnations and things like that. And in that view of the body, anything that we're suppressing like that becomes a stagnation. That's the owie. And so as we like bring the light through there, as we shed the light on it, as we illuminate it, as we bring it to consciousness and name it, we can then start to work with it. So I think this is what's been sort of intriguing to me recently. At the same time that most people come in the door because they've got the owie, right? And they just want me to fix the owie. And it's like, I can say I'm going to fix the owie, or I can say, I have fixed this kind of owie before. Mm-hmm. But the process is maybe going to look a little different than just you lay your body down and I get out the Allen wrench.
Yeah.
And no pun intended.
You pick up on that. Great. Yeah. And that's one of the bigger shifts for me is when I started, it was pushing tissues. It was me coming in, them lying down. And now it's really about how are we going to do this together? And, how are you going to start to learn how to have your own? I'm going to be here right now next to you. I'm going to be doing what I can, but I'm really about here showing you what had previously been unaware or had been aware of, but not wanted to be seen. And how do we get that from a really physical place? But because I am a somatic movement therapist, like Rolf movement is what really changed and inspired me to bring in more of, and then of Maitland's work as well into phenomenology, to bring in more of this beingness. It's and it's all about that. But some people, yeah, it's just meeting people where they're at and helping them maybe go a little further as we see people, as I currently see. You're I don't know if you're familiar with the poem, and I read this to almost all of my clients. I feel like if you aren't familiar with it, it speaks exactly what you just said about the. I think it's called Autobiography in 5 Short Chapters. I'll send you a link later. It's about a hole in the sidewalk, and the whole each chapter is basically outlining what you just said in this way. And it's I use it a lot. I use stories, books, quotes, things, metaphors, just as a way to bridge across so that someone can have, again, not just, oh, this is what Andrew is saying, but a shift in there that, oh, all of a sudden the bridge happens, that I say, oh, I can understand this thing that I couldn't understand because of this, whatever. So I'll send it to you.
Yeah, that sounds great. That just reminded me of this. And since your wife is Chinese, she'll probably correct me all over the place. But there's a term in Chinese medicine called Ling, and it's they refer to it as the soul depth, the capacity to move you from a distance. So, like music, And I think this is what we in our offices, what we really are trying to do is like, I'm not just going to like fix you right now. I'm going to send you off, and later you're going to be reminded of some cue or some sensation that we worked with that helps you open back up to that feeling, like give you the earworm of that somatic experience that you had in the office that now is part of your potential in any given day. So yeah. I think that's, for me, I love that, that idea that, we are not the doer. That's the biggest piece for me is like, there's a Lonnie Jarrett again, he says, healing is not about technique at all. Totally irrespective of that. It's based solely in the relationship.
Yeah, that's where I have come more to. I definitely came up out of the spiritual materialism way of being because it's so endemic within our worldview. But I definitely am coming around to Lonnie's way.
Yeah, well, I think it's very difficult. We all struggle with the guilt and the shoulds and the I'm not enough and all those neuroses that are so attractive. And when we can just rest into like, for me to just be here and just put my attention on you is 90+% of what needs to happen. And then, in the web that has no weaver, I can't remember the author's name off the top of my head right now. He says, the modality is just what entertains the practitioner while the healing happens. I think that's, it's true and it's not true. There's definitely skillful means and toggle constantly between the skillful means and that relationship. And hopefully when we zoom into that skillful mean, we're not dropping the relationship. And I think that is, something that when we go to classes and we learn all these techniques, it's like we're sort of artificially putting that presence away and focusing on the technique. And, for some people, that's just fine. They can accept that in their bodies without a problem. And for other folks, it's like, oh, this isn't working.
Yeah.
I like to make sure that stays as we, I don't want you to do what I do. I want you to, there.
I've shared the story, I think, on the podcast before, but I had taken a class with, maybe I did share it in Pierre Paula's talk, but I took a class with her, and there was someone who was a new Rolfer in the class, and it was a Rolf movement class. And, Pierre Paula did her demonstration, and then we were supposed to switch. And I had been doing it more, and maybe I'm more inclined into that somatic way of just feeling it. I think Karen McCo's helped me with that a lot. And I would watch what the teacher was doing, but I wouldn't repeat it verbatim because the client I was working with or the student wasn't the same person that they were working with. And I could kind of synergize it. And this one student said, I'll work with you as long as you do exactly what the teacher did, because they wanted to feel and to get it, which I totally get. And both ways are fine, but it was really hard for me because that way of witnessing was saying that's not the most efficient way for this being right now. This other thing seems to have more of an impact, yet in that moment it would not, because their nervous system would shut down on not getting what they perceived they wanted. And so again, how do you meet that?
Right. Well, I think that goes back to the projection, like the projection is, those are the magic words. Yeah. and the thing is, it's not the magic words, it's the magic connection. And so you're not pure Paula.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful, like,
I'd like to be more like her, but
is. We're all our own wonderful beings. And so that dynamic of the relationship, what we were talking about the teacher and the student, like everybody brings something and it's never the same twice.
Yeah.
Like that moment can't be recreated. Even if I do the same session with a person later, it's not the same. I'm not going to use the same words. It's never going to fall out twice. So it'll be different. And I think that's great. That's what keeps it interesting, right?
Yeah. It is.
The job I've had the longest in my whole life. Every other job I've been like, I feel like I'm getting pretty good at this. I'm out of here. Now I'm like 30 years in and I'm going, I feel still like I don't know what I'm doing quite a lot.
Yeah. It's funny because I hear you saying that, and something you read that's something I read that you sent me in our text earlier today. And yet it's interesting to hear you saying, the part of you that feels you don't know what you're doing. And I say, well, I think that's a thought, but I think you do feel exactly what you're doing and that you do feel it. And as long as your thinking and your feeling don't get, as long as the two parts of your brain stay in their own corners and the thinker doesn't try to poke like they always like to do, then you do. It's just those things that come in. But from what I've experienced from being in our rich dialogues and from hearing other people, you know what to do.
Or I'm willing to sit there and not know until I do.
But that's it. But that's the same for me. That's the same thing, and I think that's the tricky part is there is such a paradox in all of this, and that's where our brain can get as it does, and the thinking can go over. Because it doesn't quite make sense, and the ways of thinking or the education we had before, the logic structures, they don't. But it's in that sitting I have this sort of theory about, and I've been talking with some friends about, why is it that some SI people are so, in my view, so dysregulated and some are so regulated. And my belief is it's those who have a contemplative practice, whatever that is, and those who can sit in inquiry and can sit in question and can sit in silence, they seem to, and again, in my view, be more regulated, yourself included. And those who don't, they don't have that, and they're much more, again, in my view, in that thinking and that dominating and that insecure, which gets masked and becomes over secure and over dominant. Yeah, my views. So that's just something I'm working with.
Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that having a practice of some kind is so helpful, because if for nothing else, you learn how you respond. I learn how I respond in these ways. And I was reading, somebody wrote something about like meditation is absolute attention and absolute ease simultaneously. And I was like, yeah, about like 1/100th of the time.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, it's a friggin' job. You're sitting on the cushion going like, yeah, I'm gonna get there. But like if you walk the path enough, you will in fact find that you can focus your attention and also be at ease at the same time. Yeah. Can I do that all the time? No. Do I have self-doubt and am I judging myself and Sure. But at the same time, I've learned that I can also just sit there through that. And that's, I think, the thing that we, when I was teaching the basic trainings, I felt like we didn't get to have enough time for students. There was always this time pressure and just that practice of like, I'm just going to sit here with my not knowing for however long it takes is such a precious thing to be able to do. And I had an assistant who was fabulous, Dave Sheldon, who would just go over and sit with the student who was having the freak out, who couldn't start the session because they just didn't know where to start. And then he would just sit with them, and it might be 20 minutes. And he made the space for that. And it made the world of difference for those students to be able to just take that time. But that's just not something that we can, that it wasn't available routinely. And I think so a piece that if I were going to write the perfect training, there would be a lot of just sort of hanging out with the like, wow, this is really uncomfortable. Okay, this is it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really fortunate that I had Ray for my phase 3, and we started every class either in meditation or in a horizon. And that there's so many things I didn't realize what Ray was doing, partly because, and I've said this numerous times, I was so dysregulated at that training, unawarely so. And, I had a meditative practice before, so I loved it. But relating it to the work with where I am now, when I look back, it's like, wow, that was really a really wonderful piece of having that space in contemplation, in quote unquote silence together, while also being in our own. It'd be nice if every training had that, but not every teacher, and no bias, not every teacher could do that or could support that. And that's one of the challenges with the program, which people almost always complain about, is there's such different people, but that's also what makes it such a rich program, paradoxically so, again, or ironically so, whatever that would be, is that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it's what's a beautiful thing about the work is people, I mean, especially when I trained, like the average age of a student was about 44 years old. So people came with a whole career, a whole life behind them. Their kids were adults. They were, they were really in a different place. I was young. I was 28. I was one of the youngest people in the training. And that was, kind of anomalous at that point to be under 40 and do the training. That's
now.
Shifted. Yeah. So we have a different group that are coming in, and it's a different generation and they have a different worldview. And I think that's the place where the training has to be able to evolve. That, we really want to stick to, yes, this is the work, but how do we teach this to a generation that's coming in much younger and with a very different life experience and worldview than we had as, like I can say this now, as a middle-aged person, if I walk into a room and I sit with a bunch of 20-year-olds, I'm like, wow, I'm so old. And, they'll very kindly help me with some of my technology, and hopefully I can be of assistance to them in some other way. I don't know what it is, but
holding space for them, because most of them are also very dysregulated because of the culture and the way that they grew up. And so you get to help in that way. And that's wonderful.
Yeah. But there's also some amazing, there's that said, I've had some really amazing, very young students who just, had it together for whatever life just, they came in, they had their good karma, and they came in and they were already had that maturity. But yeah, I think it's something that we can all always use more of. There's nobody's saying like, oh yeah, I'm so aware, I don't need any more awareness.
Well, there are people who are saying that, but that's generally not the case, actually.
I guess those are not the people showing up in my classes.
Yeah. Well, luckily they're not. Although maybe not. Maybe that would be a great training as well, for whatever reason. So yeah, you do have a class coming up in June in Seattle, right?
In June, yeah, starting on solstice for those of us from the edges of the hemisphere who pay attention to the sun cycles. Yeah, solstice, June 21st to 24th in West Seattle.
I'm excited for Seattle. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the people who will get to go. Even though you've already kind of mentioned you have so much information. And it's one of the things I've wondered is like, how do you, not just you, how does someone end up taking all of the information they have and distilling it in? Because when I've taught small somatic classes, I always come with a big plan as extra just in case, and I almost never get through. We go on these other tangents. But that being said, like, what's the title, the theme? What would people be going for?
Well, this class I labeled transformation in the SI context. Which is really about getting at that. What is that thing? What is the thing that makes a session really that really shifts a person's perspective? I love the way there was somebody described it as when the person identifies more with their soul and less with their wound. I was like, yeah, that's the place we want to get to, where we stop feeling like, oh, woe is me, I've got these owies, and we start feeling like, wow, I'm so able, and there's so much information coming from my body, or even just the like, you finish a session and the person goes, wow, I don't know what just happened, but that was great. Or 5 years from now, they come back to your practice and they say, well, you have no idea what happened after that. Those are the kinds of sessions. Like, how do we, and I really want to sort of underscore that this is something that we can create a condition where this can happen more and more and more. Mm-hmm. There are things to do to help this happen. Usually we stumble over them, but sometimes we can make it such that we stumble over them more often for more people. And I think that's the place that I think is really the sweet spot for me of kind of setting up the dominoes so these things can happen. And I love that I'm teaching in Seattle, because I was in grad school in Seattle. And at that time, I was like kind of a hardcore science person. And not to say that I'm not a science person anymore, but I
Different.
think the ability to toggle from that like reductionistic sort of let's tear it apart and see what works model to a more integral model where, hey, you know what? In the middle of all of us, every atom, every thing, there's something that's the same. There's something that runs throughout that's necessary for us to be.
Well, I think that's, to some extent, that's really it, is how do we hold both at the same time, and or switch between them if it's not exactly the same time, because it's not one or the other. And this is, again, one of the things within our community, not just our community, the whole world, but within our community, is it's this or it's this. And we're saying, well, no, it can actually be both. And we need both of them to see it in the various different ways. We do need that pinpoint reductionist. It's very helpful. It's almost always wrong entirely, but it helps us get to a closer refinement to it. And then we can go out and we go back. It's that undulation between them. So, I mean, that's to me, is really it.
Yeah. And I love that word, undulation. And, my background is as an acoustician. So sine waves
Really?
are the most amazingly sexy thing on the planet. It's like undulation right there. And the words like resonance. And, we say that when we look at the movement, we want to see that undulating vermicular spine, right? It's all in this richness of the language. And how do we bring that awareness forward for people? We've been so taught that we're this sort of like mechanical, mechanistic, soft machine. And the reality is that, it's becoming more and more apparent that no, we're not.
It's unplanned, but great timing, because I don't know if you saw the letter that Will Johnson had sent out, and he actually had a call with him last week, but they're doing construction in this building. And so it did not come out, but we're going to have another call. To me, what you're saying really points to exactly what Will is talking about, which is how do you, that transformation, as I hear it, is really integration. How do you perceive integration happening with the people we're working with? And a lot of that in my own practice is, through the perception when they walk, what is present, what is not, what's moving, what is not. It's not my phase 2 was so much looking at the toe strike and and all this biomechanical, and that stuff is great. There's such value within it. It's just a part of it, and I no longer really am that concerned with it, because the person can have all the wonderful biomechanics and still be an asshole. and I think that we have to find that way to, how do we bring that smoothness into them. And of course, I'm from Boston, so I say asshole a lot, and I don't mean that, but I mean that we work in the body, and they're still repressed, and there's still anger that's held within the body. They can make a beautiful simulation of how the body is, quote unquote, supposed to look. But that to me isn't an integrated human. And there's something that's not there. And what I hear you saying is, how do we then have that transformation to have that integration? Is that aligned?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I think that we're in the same chapter of the book, like I'm looking, when you said that about the, I like the picture behind you of the muscle man there, the anatomy chart, like that guy, to me, I go like, yeah, you can see all the muscles there, but that's not a real person. There's something in him. And we used to use the term, when I was early in my Rolfing experience, we used the term lift. You can see the lift happening. And we don't use that so much anymore, because some people actually need more ground. And so we're working between those two. But I like the word lift, because what I like about it is there is an acknowledgement, just like with the word the line, an acknowledgement of the energetic, because the line is not a physiological structure. It's a dynamic, non-physiological structure. So sort of we dance around the word energetic. We don't like to use it, but there it is. And I think the same thing with the word lift. When you see the person spontaneously having that palintonic relationship and, the light shines through them, that, what is the thing at the end of the 10th hour, the equivalent brilliance all the way around?
Is it radiant brilliance or something like that?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's like, if that's the goal of the 10 series, is this energetic statement, like at the very least, we can talk about it. It may not be your home place, and that's fine. But at least let's include it in the conversation and not get angry with each other that we use these terms when they've been there all along.
Yeah. Yeah. I again, inspired, although not directly studying, but it's inspired by Hubert Goddard's work and the tonic function, is that lift, or, you're saying if they have too much lift, you could even say that they need a little more ground, a reduction of lift, a little more, or they, finding that balance within that really shifted how I not just work with clients, but work with myself within that. And I think that one of the challenging parts, which I know that you will be great at teaching, just because the way that you carry yourself outside of the classroom, that to me is the biggest marker is of a practitioner, but also a teacher, is how do they carry themselves in the real world, not just in the environment. Because if they're just playing an act, that's great and you can learn a lot, but there's no integration or less integration in that as well. I mean, there can be a way where they are integrated and know that they have to really go into that, but most that I find, especially within our community, are not. They go into this acting mode as opposed to going in them as, this more embodied, vulnerable, but a human way. And I think in our work, that's what's prime. Like the prime is the humanness. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something with the vulnerability. And like from the sort of Buddhist tradition, what they would talk about is a lot of traditions. They talk about transmission. And I know Ray McCullough, he talks a lot about transmission. Like when you're doing the session, you have to do the session that the person needs. Like when you're teaching and you're doing the demo session, you've got to do a session that the person needs. Otherwise, there's no transmission. And I totally get that. And I think that's true, not just of what's the client is experiencing, but also what is the practitioner doing? If I want my students to learn like this ABC, linear sequence, they will learn that if that's what I demonstrate. But if what I demonstrate is the authentic session, including my own stumbling around and trying to figure out how to meet this person, that's what I'm going to teach them. And so I think that's really critical. And, the first time you get up to do a demo in front of 16 students and the head teacher, when you're the assistant and maybe the supervising, like Uber instructor in the back, it's a harrowing experience. You are definitely going to screw up. You are going to have moments of like, oh my God, I'm just like sweating and not sure. And somehow we get through that. And I think that's that vulnerability and that authenticity is what gets transmitted then. And that's what is really valuable.
I really would like to at some point be, I don't think I ever want to be a teacher, but I want to be a teaching assistant. I want to really be in that support role. And when you hear you saying that, there's a part of me that is like, oh, I can't wait to be in that vulnerability. Because my wife will sometimes call me a masochist because I really revel. I didn't used to, but now I really revel in being vulnerable because there's so much more to learn. There's so much more. Yes, it is challenging and can be uncomfortable in the moment, but that short bit of uncomfortability that leads generally to much longer comfort, I'll take that trade almost any day, almost any day. The moment that's happening, I'm saying I won't take it because it's hard. But afterwards, when I reflect back and I learn from it, it's like, yeah, okay, thank you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that's, we're going to enter into a relationship where our flank is exposed.
Yeah.
And that's always hard, like whether it's I'm going to go to the little social thing that's happening, if you're me and you have to leave your little enclave, like that's hard. And if it's being the assistant and doing a demo in front of a bunch of people who know something, that's also hard.
Yeah. Well, so your class is going to be about transformation. And yeah, I think the lady who organized it, her name is Jeannie, right? Yeah, she'd emailed me and saying like, would you be able to come out? And I really wanted to. I couldn't do that week, and I can't really travel so much right now for some reasons. But I'm super looking forward for any class that you teach that's a little closer to the East Coast. Because
come on, Andrew, I did live there for 15 years.
Yeah, unfortunately, I found you after you moved. Although you will see, I don't know if you can see.
Oh wow, groovy UV.
Groovy UV. Yep. This is my water bottle from college.
Did you go there?
Went to UVM.
Oh, so did I.
Oh, really?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I found it at some point. I believe Franklin Sills and Jim Jellis both also went to UVM.
I don't know if they're alumni. I know that Jim Jellis definitely lived there, but
yeah, there was something that I heard. I think Franklin Sills had actually gone there. I don't know if he graduated, but I remember reading something and he mentioned being in college. And Jim, for some reason, I don't know if I remember hearing something about him also being at UVM. I could be conflating Vermont because I know he was up there, but I think UVM was in there for some
right.
way.
I think he was probably affiliated with the UVM Health Center for sure. So yeah, interesting. Yeah. Well, that's I mean, so classic not to graduate from UVM, like to attend and not graduate. Right. That's the true UVM experience.
Yeah. I think I did know. I think that you did go there and I forgot. So it's great to have that connection in there. And I love Vermont. Yeah, and you were there in Middlebury. And I did a class a few months ago, and Amy who basically took over a lot of your practice, and she just spoke so highly of you as well. Loved being in town with you. I think partly also because you and someone else left around the same time, so all of a sudden, I think she was missing the community, but also it's kind of nice to be like, oh, I don't really have to build up so much.
Right. Suddenly I have a practice because Hani and I left within a couple months of each other. Yeah. And like I was going to say, like, yes, I'm not in Vermont right now, but, give me 8 years. That's about my standard. Vermont was probably the longest I ever lived outside of Alaska. That's definitely the longest I've been in any one place. And, it tends to ground people, which was in fact what happened for me. Here I am in Steamboat now, being totally ungrounded.
Well, I think you've had life things come up that you have responsibilities as life happens, and you're navigating them.
This is a pattern, Andrew. Like,
all right.
This is my karma. Like, I don't get to get too comfortable anywhere. Like even in Middlebury, we built this house that was like super energy efficient, like totally us, really small, groovy, and then we just walk away from it. Like we rent it out, but it's like I'm not living in the house I designed. Like, how crazy is that? Well, because more adventures called, and that was more exciting. So, all right, that's me. Spontaneity junkie.
Well, there might be if you come to Boston, I know an okay transformation SI cranial whatever worker who can. You don't need any help with that. You're good.
Oh, I suspect I can learn things, but yeah, I'm always willing to travel, and I think my life is opening up. My son is now 14, and the kind of 14 where you don't worry about him burning the house down. So this is a good thing. So, and like I still have more responsibilities than I'd like to have, but I think that's true of all of us. And but things are opening up. Like I get to go to Seattle. I'm going to go back up to Anchorage this summer, and a class in Alaska is possibly in its infancy phases.
It'd be awesome if that could happen.
Yeah. I mean, Alaska has probably per capita more Rolfers than anywhere except the Front Range. So
yeah,
maybe more.
Maybe more. Yeah, there's a lot up there. There's a lot of great body workers up there. I think it's needed because to live in that environment, you need self-care.
Well, it's a very active place, nobody sits around. So you got to get your body back together sometime.
Yeah. Just for time's sake, I would say I have a feeling we could talk forever, but I also know that we have before. Is there more you want to share at this point about either the class or about you? Is there anything that we didn't get to that you're like, this, here's the time?
Yeah, well, I think, there's always so much to talk about, but I have been appreciating, like I hear your broadcasts and I hear people who are all over the spectrum of, specificity and broad vision. And I think that's great. And so I want to say, like, I hope that I can provide those things. I really endeavor in my teaching and in this class. I'm really wanting to take my teaching to another level of like, yes, here's the science that says this is what happens in your brain when this experience happens. And here's how you create that experience. And here's what you have to do in yourself. And here's what you have to do with the client to set up the conditions where these things can happen. And so that's the piece that I'm pretty excited about. Like, I finally feel like, oh, I have a linear path to this nonlinear acausal process, which, could be just shaking my fist at the universe, like tempting to smote me. But I think this class is going to be really a sort of a great way for people to get into this that maybe have previously felt like, I know I see these people do this work where something amazing happens, but I can't track it. I don't know what's happening. I can't replicate it. I think that's what I'm after here, is trying to help people understand what's happening and break it down and be able to replicate that for themselves in class and then take it to their practice and have it be something usable. Yeah.
Well, I think there are a few teachers who I've never heard anything bad about. There's lots who I've heard lots of bad about, but there's few teachers, and you're one of them. So I appreciate your wrestling with the questions you have about how will you do it, and I think that's one of the reasons and the ways that you will do it. That's great, and I think that will come through, and that's a part of it. It's really just a part of this process that words are going to fail us to even come close to.
Right. Well, as it says in my bio, my favorite word is ineffable. So there you have it. At the core of all of it, there is something that is ineffable, and hopefully we can effing F it.
Well, there's my favorite, because being from Boston, there's my favorite word you just said right there. So together, I am going to have to really work on not dropping the F-bomb as much as I generally do, but it feels so good. It's just such a part of my culture that I'm working to.
Having grown up in Alaska, having spent most of my life in Alaska, it's something I wrestle with daily. And having a teenage son, I'm so elated that he's 14 now, and I can just be like, look, this is the way it is, and drop all the words I want in there because we've got the rapport. He can handle it. It's real world. I know he's hearing it everywhere else.
And you destigmatize it. It doesn't have to. I think to some extent words have the value we give them. And when we taboo stuff, it gives it more of a value. Whereas when you take that away, you can actually take the power away from it, or change the the relation that the word actually even has.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's true. It's all resonance. It's all energy. You don't want to spend your life in that soup. Mm-hmm. But there are, as Hubert Goddard says, balance isn't being in the middle all the time. Balance is having the range. So that's one end of the range. If I want to feel ecstatic, I also need to feel pretty shitty sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to hope. Actually, I'm not going to hope. It'll happen. We'll have another talk for this because as you have said, this is just scratching the surface of what there is. But I also, and you had mentioned this in some way, I think in the beginning, but I'm going to allude more, which is another reason I really enjoy these conversations is not really about me or the person in there. It's the person listening who is sitting in this conversation and getting something. And I think you and I have talked about this before offline about one of the best things for my practice has been having colleagues to share with. Zoe in particular. Zoe and I will have these calls that intend to last a few minutes and last an hour where my wife is yelling at me. I should be doing something else, because I haven't been doing my chores because I'm so wrapped up in it. But the expression, the sharing, the hearing other ways is such a part of it. And so I want to be in conversation with you, but I also want to share you more with others. And they can obviously share themselves with you by taking your classes.
Well, I think it's great. And I also work with people one-on-one, people want to mentor. We don't have the technology to do that.
Yeah.
Even though I'm in, the remote wilderness of Colorado.
Yeah. But I think what you do can easily be done via Zoom so easily that I'm really looking forward to hearing from people who found that out here and saying, I didn't know I could do that, or I hadn't even thought of that, and saying, wow, that time with Duffy completely changed. I'll say change the practice, but I think what we've also been hitting at is you can't change the practice without changing ourselves. And that's, growing ourselves. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I'll share. We'll share at the end. You'll give me some information, and then well, you can even say now. How would be if people wanted to contact you? Do you have a website that people can find? Right? No, I'm sure not.
I know it's really surprising that a Luddite such as myself has a website, but I do.
Oh wow.
And it's mostly because, I've been kind of on the road. And so this for my entire life. So the website has been one stable thing. So you can find me through duffytherolfer.com, or you can find me at fifth-element.training. They go to the same place. It's the same place. Good. I'm trying to rebrand. The teaching side. Fifth
Duffy rolfingelement.com. Got it.
Right.
Right. I'll put a link to those in the bio so people find it. But I love Duffy. Duffy the Rolfer is so
you can always just Google my name, and there's so few of us Duffys that it's me and that singer, and that's pretty much it.
Is there a singer Duffy?
There's a singer Duffy. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know.
She had a big moment about 10 years ago. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah, I missed that. All I could think of when you were saying was Ira Allen at UVM, and thinking,
oh yeah. Ethan Allen.
Ethan Allen, yeah.
Yes. I hear that I'm a distant relative, but I don't know.
I don't know. There's an amazing wrench named after you too. So
it's true. Yes.
It's all that.
You're a biker. You probably have a supply of them.
I do. I just took them off my bike before I drove here. And then also for those listening, it's Allen, E-N, not A-N.
That's right.
As I accidentally typed it earlier today. I look forward to sharing this out and having more talks.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for chatting and for all you're doing for the field. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to us at Touching Into Presence. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. You can find out more about Duffy at duffytherolfer.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd appreciate if you'd leave a positive review of the podcast and subscribe to it through the platform of your choice. When you do this, it really helps other people find us, and we greatly appreciate your support. We look forward to hearing back from you and seeing you on our next conversation at Touching Into Presence. Bye for now.